The email came at 3:12 a.m. It was the kind of hour when the world should be asleep, and maybe that's why Jordan ever bothered to read it. The subject line was simple: easy cash, minimal work. Jordan had seen too many phishing scams and get-rich-quick schemes to fall for something with such a blatant headline. Yet something about this one was different. It didn't promise a fortune, didn't mention cryptocurrency or inheritance from a mysterious Nigerian uncle. It simply read, "Hi Jordan, we need someone to observe and report. $300 for 2 hours of your time. No experience necessary, just look around." Attached was a location, a warehouse address on the edge of town, and a time. 9 p.m., 2 nights from now. Jordan stared at the screen in the dim glow of his apartment, rubbing a hand across his tired eyes. The job market had been unforgiving lately. His resume had floated into dozens of black holes, sent, seen, ignored. The bills piled up. Rent was due in a week. He had sold his PS5, canceled streaming services, and even resorted to eating dollar ramen. This was not a season of pride, but survival. He did a quick Google search of the company name. Observa Temp LLC. A sparse website came up, bare-bones design, a few stock photos of offices and conference tables, and a vague mission statement about data through passive evaluation. The only contact info was a form submission box and an email. No phone number, no address, nothing screamed legitimacy. But also, nothing screamed scam. Jordan sat back in his creaky desk chair, the springs whining under the shift of weight. He wasn't foolish. He knew better than to trust random emails. But this one knew his name, and more unnervingly, it didn't. Ask for anything sensitive, no banking information, no passwords, just his physical presence at a location for a short period of time. He debated it for hours. He reread the message a dozen times, paced his small apartment, and even called his best friend Kyle to ask what he thought. "Dude, it's shady as hell," Kyle said, his voice fuzzy over speakerphone. "People don't pay money for you to do nothing. They just want me to observe," Jordan replied. "Just look around." "Yeah, that's what stalkers do too. Look around. Until they don't." Jordan exhaled, annoyed and still unconvinced. "It's probably some corporate espionage thing. Like a competitor wants someone to log what another company's doing without arousing suspicion. Or they want a scapegoat. Thanks for the vote of confidence." Jordan ended the call not long after, his mind still spinning. That night, he barely slept. Not because of fear, but because of curiosity and hunger. Hunger for money, yes, but also for purpose. When you've been unemployed long enough, you start craving structure, even if it comes in the form of an eerie, unsolicited email. 2 days later, he stood outside the warehouse at 8:57 p.m., watching the sun finally disappear behind the outline of crumbling industrial buildings. The air smelled like rust and old oil. The warehouse itself was massive. Metal walls, blacked-out windows, a single flickering light above a steel door. He wasn't alone. 3 other people were there too. A middle-aged woman in business casual, nervously chewing her thumbnail, a guy in a leather jacket who looked like he belonged more at a biker rally than a job assignment, and a teenage girl, no older than 16, who clearly wasn't here with parental permission. Jordan approached cautiously. "You guys here for the observation thing?" The woman nodded. "Yeah, you too?" "Guess so." They didn't say much else. At exactly 9 p.m., the steel door unlatched with a loud click and opened just enough to reveal a figure in the shadows. They were dressed in black, face obscured by a mask that resembled a fencing helmet. A distorted voice came through a small speaker at their neck. "You've all agreed to the terms. No phones, no cameras. You look, you observe, you report. Nothing more. No touching, no interference. 2 hours." The woman fumbled with her purse, then hesitated. We just walk around," Yes. And we get paid? Yes. It was almost hypnotic the way the figure said it, as if that one word could wash away any lingering doubts. And somehow, it did. Inside, the warehouse was pitch dark, save for a few dim emergency lights lining the far wall. The figure handed each of them a small digital recorder. Speak your observations. When you're done, drop the recorder in the box by the door. Payment will be wired to your accounts. Do not revisit this location. That was it. Jordan entered the building and immediately felt the weight of silence. It wasn't empty. He could tell that much right away. There were things inside, structures, rooms, hallways. And people? No, not people. Figures. Still. Forms, unmoving. Some seated at desks, others standing in corners. Like mannequins, but not quite. Too realistic, too detailed. One of them had what looked like tears carved into its cheeks. He tried not to stare, tried to focus on the task. Observe. Report! He clicked on the recorder. Entering northern quadrant. 3 rooms on the left, 2 doors sealed shut. One mannequin figure appears to be looking toward the ceiling, another seated in a chair facing away. His voice echoed in the space like it didn't belong there. He moved carefully, his footsteps padded against the dust-covered concrete. In the corner of the room, a low humming noise vibrated through the air, like distant machinery warming up. The girl passed him once, her face pale, eyes wide. She didn't speak. One of the figures moved. He wasn't sure at first. He blinked, looked away, looked back. It had been facing the wall. Now it was turned halfway toward him. He recorded the change aloud, keeping his voice as steady as he could. Maybe it was programmed. A trick. A test. But the air had changed. The light dimmed further, even though the emergency lights remained on. The shadows seemed to grow teeth. After 20 more minutes, Jordan couldn't take it. He returned to the front door, dropped his recorder in the box, and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Nothing. He tried the handle. Locked. Behind him, the shadows moved again, and then, just as quickly as the horror mounted, the door clicked and opened. The masked figure stood there, wordless. Jordan didn't wait. He stepped outside, nearly collapsing with relief into the night air. The others followed one by one. None of them spoke. They just scattered. At 1:12 a.m., an email came in. Thank you for your time. Payment has been received. It was true. $300 now sat in his bank account. Jordan deleted the message and told himself never to go back, never to speak of it. But then, 3 nights later, a second email arrived. This one offered $1,000 just to look around. Jordan told himself he wouldn't say yes. He paced the floor of his apartment, checking the bank app on his phone for the 20th time, watching the $300 balance sit there like a guilty conscience. It had been 3 days since the warehouse. 3 days of strange dreams, of waking up at 3:12 a.m. exactly, drenched in sweat. And now, this second email, $1,000 for a follow-up observation. Same conditions. This time, bring a flashlight. It was the flashlight part that made him hesitate. Not the money, not the mystery. Those were already inside him like poison seeds. But the specificity. The request wasn't casual. It was a command. Someone knew what the building was like. Someone knew how dark it was. And they wanted him back in it. Jordan ignored the email for hours. But like a persistent knock at the door, it echoed through his mind with rhythmic precision. Every time he tried to focus on something else, his brain wandered back. He thought about the figures, the mannequins that might not have been mannequins, the humming noise, the woman who bit her nails, the girl with the wide, haunted eyes. He wondered if they'd gotten the same invitation, if they'd also been offered more money, if they were even still alive. At 8:30 p.m. that night, Jordan found himself walking again toward the warehouse. This time he brought a flashlight, a larger mag light with heavy batteries that could double as a weapon if needed. He wore jeans, thick boots, and a hoodie, stuffing the flashlight into his front pocket as he approached the lot. The same flickering light hung above the door. The air was colder than last time. Even the concrete under his feet felt less stable. The same masked figure waited at the door, not speaking, not moving, just standing there like a guard of a mausoleum. Jordan stepped forward, and the door unlatched. Inside, it was worse. The layout had changed. What had been a series of small office rooms now looked like a corridor stretching into blackness, flanked by tall dividers that looked hastily built. The figures were there again, but more numerous this time. Some sat in wheelchairs, some were arranged in groups. One was hanging upside down from the ceiling with its arms stretched down, fingers nearly brushing the floor. Jordan turned on his flashlight and winced. The beam cut through the dark like a knife through flesh. The mannequin, if that's what it still was, had eyes, real ones, wet and glossy. He staggered back, heart racing, but said nothing. Just raised the recorder they had given him again and pressed the button. "Commencing second observation," he said. "Figures are arranged differently. Appears to be a scene constructed to mimic a hospital wing or nursing home. Some figures resemble people in states of distress." He turned a corner and stopped cold. The teenage girl from the first night stood there, not a mannequin, real, very real. She looked worse now, paler. Her pupils were blown wide like a deer caught in headlights. "Hey," Jordan whispered, stepping closer. "You okay?" She didn't answer. Her lips trembled. Her gaze wasn't on him, but behind him. Jordan turned. The flashlight slowly. A figure loomed at the end of the hallway. It wasn't like the others, taller, thinner, no eyes, no mouth, but the head tilted like it was watching. He felt the beam of light hesitate in his hand, then flicker. The batteries, fully charged only hours ago, began to die. He didn't wait. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her with him, away from the figure toward the main hall. She followed without a word, stumbling slightly. Her breath came in short gasps, but she didn't resist. They made it back to the central area, where a new structure had been erected. A mock classroom, complete with rows of child-sized desks, and a whiteboard stained red in one corner. Something scratched at the glass of a window above them. Jordan didn't look up. "This is insane," he muttered. "This isn't just a job." The girl finally spoke. Her voice was small. "They told me my dad worked here, but he never came home." Jordan froze. "Your dad?" She nodded. "That's why I came the first time. Thought maybe I'd find him. I think he's one of them now." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't want to know. The shadows were thicker now. Something moved behind the classroom wall, a dragging sound like wet cloth pulled across tile. He pulled her again, fast, toward the exit. When they reached the door, the masked figure was already there, standing in front of it. "We're done," Jordan said, chest heaving. "Let us out." No reply. Jordan raised the flashlight. "Let us out." The figure stepped aside. No drama, no threats. Just opened the door like it had all been a test they'd passed. They stumbled out into the night, gasping like they'd been underwater. The girl collapsed onto the ground, sobbing. Jordan stood there, feeling the weight of 1,000 unseen, eyes pressing against his back. The door slammed behind them. An hour later, another email came. "Thank you for your participation. Payment complete." Jordan didn't check his account. He didn't care anymore. But when the third email came, 2 days later, offering $5,000, he didn't delete it either. Jordan didn't reply to the third email right away. $5,000 was no longer a number. It was a test, an anchor dragging him deeper. He knew he should delete it, block the sender, maybe go to the police. But what could he say? "Hi, officers. Someone paid me to walk around a haunted warehouse filled with possibly living mannequins that move when you're not looking." They'd laugh. Or worse, detain him for drugs. Instead, He turned the email over in his mind like a coin. $5,000, final phase. 1 hour. Observe. Bring a mirror. That part chilled him to the bone. First, a flashlight. Now, a mirror. It felt ritualistic, like whoever or whatever ran this company was following a set of steps too ancient and specific to be improvised. He called Kyle again. He needed a tether to normalcy. They offered me $5,000 this time, Jordan said. 1 hour, just one. Bring a mirror. Kyle was quiet for a long time. Bro, he finally said, don't. Seriously, don't. I have to. It's not even about the money anymore. Something's happening in that building, Kyle. People are disappearing. There's a girl. Her dad worked there. She thinks he's one of them now. One of those figures. You sound like you're losing it. I'm not. Jordan paused. I'm trying to keep her from losing it. I think she's going back too. I can't let her go in alone. Then I'm coming with you. No. Jordan's voice was firm. This isn't your fight. Then it shouldn't be yours either. But it was. The next night, Jordan returned. The girl, her name was Maya, he'd learned, was already there, standing under the flickering warehouse light with a cracked makeup mirror clutched in her hand. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollowed out from lack of sleep. But she stood tall. You're really doing this? Jordan asked her. I need to see him. One last time. The masked figure opened the door without a word. This time, Jordan noticed something. The figure's hands were bare, human, pale, veined. But the eyes behind the black visor, there were no whites, just darkness. They entered together, flashlights and mirrors in hand. The warehouse had changed again. No longer a maze, no longer a classroom. It was something older now. Stone floors, archways, columns, like a temple built underground. The ceiling was impossibly high, the air damp and cold. Figures stood along the walls like worshippers at a funeral. Some were hunched, some knelt. Others held their arms up as if frozen mid-prayer. Why a mirror? Maya asked. Jordan didn't answer. He didn't know. But something told him not to look at the figures directly. He raised the mirror and angled it toward one of them. The reflection showed something that made his stomach flip. It moved. In the mirror, the figure twitched, just slightly, enough to break the illusion of stillness. But when he turned to look with his eyes, nothing. Another twitch in the glass, a jerking, inhuman lurch, then another. Maya let out a gasp as her own mirror revealed similar motion behind them. The figures were shifting now, ever so subtly, like dancers returning to pose between steps, only visible through the mirror. It's them, Maya whispered. The ones who came before us. The ones who stayed too long. She was right. The walls were lined with former observers, people. Some still wore badges. One had a torn sleeve with the Observer Temp logo. Their eyes were glassy, unseeing, but they moved in the reflection, just a little. The center of the space held a sunken circle, like an arena. In the middle was a chair, a real one, leather, cracked. And in that chair sat a man, tall, slumped forward, hands tied to the armrests with thick black cords. Maya gasped and ran toward him. "Wait!" Jordan shouted, but she was already kneeling beside him. "Dad!" she said. "Dad, it's me, Maya!" The man stirred. Jordan raised the mirror, afraid to see, but he had to. The reflection showed the man lifting his head. His mouth opened, slow and wide, too wide, not in speech, in a scream. But no sound came out, only darkness. It spilled out like smoke, curling into the air. Maya screamed and staggered back. The man collapsed forward again, the shadow rising from him like it had shed its host. Figures began to move. No, longer subtle. They turned. Their heads snapped. Their limbs cracked into motion. The mirror trembled in Jordan's hand. "Maya, run!" They fled the circle, weaving between stone columns as the figures pursued, not with speed, but persistence. Every time Jordan looked through the mirror, they were closer, reaching, grinning. Some were crying blood. One had a mouth where its eyes should be. They reached the exit. The door was closed. The masked figure stood in front of it again. "Open it!" Jordan yelled. "Now!" The figure cocked its head. Then, for the first time, it spoke in a real voice. No distortion, no speakers. "You've seen too much," Maya screamed. Jordan didn't hesitate. He raised the mirror and shattered it across the figure's helmet. The glass cracked. The mask broke open. The figure's face was Jordan's. Not exactly. Older, gaunt, twisted, but it was him. He stumbled back. "What? What is this?" The doppelganger smiled. "We all come back, eventually." The warehouse door burst open, behind him. Wind howled in from nowhere. Jordan grabbed Maya and sprinted outside. When they looked back, the warehouse was gone, just a stretch of cracked asphalt and silence. Jordan didn't sleep much anymore. He couldn't. Even when his eyes closed, his mind remained awake, adrift in the fog between memory and nightmare. It had been nearly a month since the warehouse disappeared, but the silence that followed felt more like the eye of a storm than a resolution. He kept expecting something, anything, to happen, but instead of emails or phone calls, there was only static. Static in his thoughts, in the background noise of city streets, in the hollow ringing of his ears when he lay awake at night. And yet he couldn't convince himself that it was over. Not truly. Because something had changed the night he shattered. The mirror across the masked figure's face and saw his own distorted reflection staring back. That version of himself, the one who had stayed too long, the one who had become part of the machinery, had felt real, not symbolic. As if time wasn't linear inside that place, and the warehouse had been feeding him glimpses of his inevitable future. The worst part was, he believed it. Jordan tried to reclaim some normalcy, though he wasn't sure what that meant anymore. He deleted his email account, wiped his phone, even moved to a different apartment in a new neighborhood across town. He thought maybe if he could outrun the memory, the warehouse wouldn't be able to follow him. But he was wrong. It didn't need wires or addresses. It was already inside him, stitched into his perception like a splinter in the eye. Every so often, in moments when he forgot to be vigilant, he caught sight of movement in reflective surfaces. A quick twitch in a puddle as he passed, a head turning in a store window that vanished when he looked directly. Once, he saw a figure waiting in the mirror of his medicine cabinet, perfectly still, but when he opened it to grab a bottle of aspirin, the figure was gone, and the aspirin had turned to dust. He never heard from Maya again. She had moved in, with an aunt, someone distant and unaffiliated with the company. They'd exchanged a few messages after escaping the warehouse, brief texts, tight with unspoken fear, but eventually she stopped responding. Jordan didn't blame her. There were things you couldn't say out loud without risking them becoming true. Maybe she had found a way to forget. Maybe she'd decided pretending it hadn't happened was safer than remembering it did. But Jordan didn't have that luxury. The warehouse had left a mark on him, invisible to everyone else but unmistakable to him. He felt it sometimes in his hands, how they trembled when he passed certain buildings. He felt it in his dreams, which always began the same way. Standing, alone in front of a flickering overhead light, the door to the warehouse half open, waiting for him. It was a Tuesday when the silence broke. Jordan had just returned from a grocery run, carrying a bag of canned soup and bread up the stairs of his new apartment building when he saw it, a plain cardboard box sitting outside his door. No address, no return label. Just his name, scrawled in shaky black ink across the top like it had been written by a hand unfamiliar with letters. He stopped, breath catching in his throat. For a long moment, he just stared at it, every cell in his body screaming at him to walk away, to leave it untouched. But some part of him, curiosity, inevitability, duty, overrode the fear. He stepped forward, knelt down, and carefully lifted the lid. Inside was a headset, not a gaming headset, but something older, bulkier, industrial, the kind used in training, simulations, or military operations. It looked worn, almost scorched in places, with wires fraying out like roots. Beneath it lay a folded note. Jordan unfolded it with shaking hands and read the message. "You're ready to see the truth." That night, Jordan didn't sleep at all. He placed the headset on his kitchen table, turned all the lights on, and sat on his couch staring at it for hours. He tried to tell himself he wouldn't use it, that he had learned his lesson. But that wasn't true. He had learned the lesson, but it wasn't what he'd expected. The real lesson wasn't don't go back. It was you already have. The warehouse was a loop, a recursion, a trap that didn't begin when you entered its walls, but when you said yes the first time. He hadn't escaped. Not really. He'd just stepped further in. At 3:12 a.m., the same time he always woke up gasping from dreams, Jordan stood up, crossed the room, and picked up the headset. The moment it touched his skin, something deep in the air changed. A humming, familiar and awful, began to thrum in the walls. He slid the device over his eyes and the world vanished. When the visor flickered on, Jordan gasped. He wasn't home anymore. He stood in the warehouse again, but this time it was different. It wasn't a version of it. It was it. The stone, columns, the empty wheelchairs, the endless hallways. He turned and saw the same circle in the floor, the chair in the center. But this time, every figure that lined the walls turned their heads in perfect unison to face him, not slowly, not subtly. One moment they were still, and the next they were aware, watching, smiling. Their faces, lifeless but knowing, pressed into masks of observation. Jordan tried to move, but his feet stuck to the ground like tar. Then he heard a voice, his voice, coming from every direction at once. "Welcome, observer. Phase final." The figures began to move. Some twitched, some walked. One crawled across the ceiling like an insect. In their hands, they each carried mirrors, hundreds of them, shards of all shapes and sizes. Every mirror showed a different version of Jordan, sleeping, screaming, bleeding, smiling. He saw himself aging in reverse. He saw himself strapped to a chair. He saw himself as the masked figure standing at the warehouse door. He saw himself vanish. Jordan screamed and ripped the headset off. He was back in his apartment, but the lights had gone out. The walls were bleeding shadow, the floor a smear of reflection that pulsed with every heartbeat in his chest. On his table, the headset sizzled, then turned to ash. The mirror in his bathroom cracked down the center with an audible snap. He knew then what the key was. Not the physical one Maya had given him in the dream, though he still carried that too. The real key was acceptance, that he was part of the system now, an observer, not by contract, but by identity, and that one day, when the loop came around, again, it would be his turn to wear the mask, to wait at the door, to usher in the next version of himself and smile when he asked the question, "What's the job?" He began seeing the ads again, on random pages, on bus stops, sometimes even on his own reflection. Always the same message, observer needed, no experience required, just look around. And now he understood the final truth. You were never offered the job. You were always meant to take it.